back in 2015, I saw an article that said New Jersey had the highest foreclosure rate, and I also noticed that there was a need for information uh, with regard to this market in New Jersey. Even though I do also do New York, I wanted to target New Jersey, and so ever since then, I've been compiling and updating and providing more information on a foreclosure report, and I'll provide a link for you to download on that report and for you to get access to it in the future as well. So my ultimate goal here is to provide you, whether you're an investor, an agent, or other professionals, whether you're maybe in the mortgage industry or an attorney, valuable information, so that you can utilize that information to have a competitive advantage for your business. All right, and so why do people? I guess why do people sell real estate? First of all, and I want to get kind of step back a little bit and kind of give a little bit of a background as to, when you think about it, why do people sell real estate? And they sell real estate, and for those that are, we're talking about in the distressed market, there are really three situations where a person needs to sell, because they either have some sort of a financial situation, or they are in a situation, whether a financial situation can be unemployment. A situation can be their employment have been relocated, and so they may be covering two mortgages or two a house mortgage payment and rent. And so they now in essence become into a financial situation, but it really derived from a certain situation in their relocation, employment. It could be also divorce. And then the third type is physical property condition. So maybe they haven't kept up to date on the condition of the house, and so they don't have the money to fix it up when they need to sell. And so in those situations, those we are talking about in distressed situations. And so most of the time what ends up happening is that they end up usually not necessarily the first thing that goes, but usually most of the time when it comes to it, it's a major expense as part of somebody, like a family's expense. A mortgage is a huge bulk of their expenses, and so if your income decreases, your mortgage, you're not going to be able to pay the mortgage. And so this market has always been here and will continue to be here. And so, for you to learn about this market, I think is critical if you're an investor and an agent as well. And so the more you know, then you can apply that and use that to guide homeowners and give them options. All right. So, and then the other thing, I think the other side of the coin is that the short sale market is constantly changing, and it's not like changing every day, but it is changing on a monthly basis. Banks are changing guidelines; they're always changing. Banks are always either service release. One bank is buying another mortgage, and so there's always constant change that's going on within the short sale market. And so that's the reason why I decided I'm going to be compiling this foreclosure report, and every year I've added more information, updated information. All right, let's move on. So what happens to your house in foreclosure? And the other reason for this webinar is because I believe that there's a lot of bad advice or bad information out there in the public or on the internet, or people talking about it. And so the goal here is to provide you the right information and the most trusted information, hopefully, and hopefully to gain your trust. Now, I don't know everything, but I think, from my 10 years of experience in this market, I've come to some there's truth and there's practicality of how to do things, and so we'll go into that. All right, so hold on a second. I forgot to make some notes. So, like, for example, some of the misconceptions are, number one, a lot of homeowners walk away from their property, and they think that just walking away from their property, they don't have any consequences. The fact of the matter is, there is consequences, especially if you're underwater. That the IRS, I got a homeowner that decided to just walk away. She just, she's underwater and she was leaving the country, and she's like, I don't care about this property anymore. And then I had to educate her and tell her, hey, it has consequences, and the IRS is going to get involved. And she's like, why the IRS? The fact of the matter is, because what happens is that, not to go into in detail, but when the house is under foreclosure and you're underwater on the mortgage, the bank is going to file a 1099 eventually, when they sell the house or when it gets foreclosed on. And then when the 1099 goes to the IRS is going to look for that money that's going to be derived from that 1099. And so even though you're out of the country, when you come back and you start filing your tax return, the IRS is going to come after you. That's one entity that you don't want to mess around with, okay? And then the other misconception is bankruptcy and homeowners. Thinking that once they file bankruptcy, that they're done. They don't have to worry about the property. And that's even attorneys telling homeowners that, you file bankruptcy, don't worry about it. But that's not true, because the property is still under the homeowners. You're still owner of that property. So if anybody, worst case scenario is anything were to happen to anybody in that property, get hurt, and they, file a lawsuit against, they're not going to file, the attorney is going to file a lawsuit against the bank, but most importantly, they're going to file whoever's on the deed on that property, and which is that person that, even though they filed bankruptcy, they're still on title, all right? And then another thing, I just wrote these down, was that homeowners paying people to do loan modification. And this is one thing that, that I know for a fact, is that you cannot do an average individual cannot accept money to do a loan modification on behalf of a homeowner. That's illegal. The only person that could take money is an attorney. And so if you know anybody that is paying somebody to do a loan modification and that person is not an attorney, that is illegal, okay? And that's one of the reasons I don't do loan modifications, even though I could, because I am actually an attorney, but I don't, because it's just, at the end of the day, I feel like I'm taking money away from homeowners that really is not really necessary, okay? So let's move on. I don't want to take too much of the time. All right, so New Jersey is a judicial foreclosure state. There are trustee states, but New Jersey happens to be judicial. So that means that the lender, it's going to take a while for the foreclosure process can take up to a year or more, depending on the type of financial institution. So let's say a bigger bank will probably take longer, whereas a smaller community bank they're gonna push to get that property back, because at the end of the day, they want to get that property and get their money back as quickly as possible, because there could be hundreds of thousands of dollars tied to that property. All right, so let me just go to the next slide. All right, so we're going to go over now the foreclosure stages in an overview. And so the first thing, that when somebody becomes, somebody has some sort of financial situation, or those situations that I talked about previously, the first thing that's going to happen is that when you stop paying the mortgage, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to be a hit on your credit. Okay, 30 days after that 30 days is going to be a hit on your credit, and your credit is going to be hit. It's going to be affected. And then by federal law, the bank have to wait at least 120 days. So that's 4 months before they could file what's called a list pendant, and that's a legal process that the bank files a lawsuit to try to get possession or get the property back through the courts, right? And so that's what's going to happen, okay? And then the next process is during that foreclosure process, now the homeowner has options. Now I'm not going to go over all of the options available, but these are the major considerations. So whether the homeowner is in a short sale, not short sale, a short term or temporary option, condition, then they could go for a mortgage reinstatement. They could go for a forbearance. They could go for repayment. So mortgage reinstatement is basically to reinstate their mortgage by catching up with the payment plus late fees. So if you're late with 2 months payment, then you can take that 2 months and then they'll reinstate the mortgage. Forbearance is you can request the bank to give you a forbearance for a certain period of time, or you can ask for a reduction. And then the other one is you could, let's say if you're late like 5 months, you could ask for some sort of a repayment plan on top of the mortgage payment. And so those are various options. The only consideration there is that nowadays, banks are always changing because they're being more aggressive nowadays. There's this one, I just spoke with an agent that was meeting with a homeowner, and she called me for some advice, and she was saying that the mortgage servicer was actually declining the homeowner's request to reinstate the mortgage. And so can they do that? Yes, they can decline it, or they could say this the only way that you can reinstate it is catch up to your payment, which was, I think he owed close to $17,000, which he did not have. And so he requested some sort of a repayment, and the bank declined, and they said either pay up or they're going to proceed to foreclosure. Okay, I think they actually started the foreclosure process, and he wanted to just catch up. For whatever reason he wanted to. I do know the reason why he wanted to stay, but I basically gave him my advice, which most homeowners don't want to hear that advice, but I gave my advice and I gave my 2 cents, and it's up to him to make that decision. All right. Okay, next, let's move forward. So the next option that's available is if the financial situation is a long-term and it's permanent, and that's either to request a loan modification, you can do a short sale, or a deed in lieu. Now, we'll just go over those very quickly. So here's a practical thing. So most homeowners think their situation is a short term, and then what happens is it snowballs into a long term, because and that's just that's what people have this optimistic view that their financial situation is going to change or become better, and then they start going delinquent on their payment, and it becomes a snowball effect, and now they got so much they can't catch up, or they can't repay, and then it becomes now a long term, but they still are not living, but they're still in that optimistic view that, hey, I could make this happen, I could do something about it. And so most people go and try to do a loan modification, and this is where it gets a little, as much as it breaks my heart to see the homeowners go through this stage, is that you take like 6 months, 8 months to do a loan modification, and then all of a sudden they wake up and they say, oh man, I got to do a short sale, I got to sell the property, and now it becomes like 30 days before a share sale, and they come to me and say, oh my gosh, I got to sell my house within 30 days. Now it becomes a very stressful situation. All right. And so it becomes too late. So that becomes an issue. And so the other option is to do a deed in lieu. Now, a deed in lieu is basically saying, just the banks or the homeowner says, okay, I don't want to deal with this short sale process, and I don't want to do a loan modification. I just want to be done with, and I want to give my keys and just walk away from the property. Couple of considerations. So when you do that is there has to be a clear title. You cannot just hand over a key. In order for the bank to, it doesn't work that way. You don't just give the key and just walk away. The bank you have to sign some documents. And so one of the things that you have to make sure that the homeowner, when they sign the document, is that there is a deficiency waiver clause in that deed in lieu agreement. If they don't have that deficiency waiver, then there's no why would you hand your keys over? That's the whole point of trying to do this, is that the whole point of this, the short sale and the deed in lieu, is making sure that the homeowner has a deficiency waiver, so they're not liable for any deficiency, meaning that what they owe and what the bank could get for that property, they're not liable for any difference. Okay, and then also with a deed in lieu, you have to actually apply to the bank, and it's not necessarily 100% guarantee. Like I said, there has the clear title, meaning if there's any there could be. So one of the things is that when somebody's delinquent on their mortgage, they're delinquent on other things, and so there could be condo fees, IRS liens, credit card bills. What else? There's so it has the clear title. What I'm not necessarily personal judgments, but something that's physically on that title, on that property. And then so the most important thing when I talk about these situations, and long-term, short-term, is that you as an investor and agent are these options, and you can provide some sort of guidance to best help the homeowner. And the downside is that the only way that an investor is technically are gonna make close or make commissions or make money on it is most of the time is through a short sale. Okay, so you always have to think about, you don't want to push short sales to them, but there are other options available, and so you want to guide them. And so a lead that came in a couple of months ago, I told her she didn't want to deal with trying to do a short sale. She didn't want the hassle of listing the property, and I said, go ahead and do the deed in lieu. I don't do it. I don't want to, it's something that she can do herself. The only thing that she really has to do is make sure that somebody reads that deed in lieu, that agreement, and making sure, even if you have to pay an attorney a couple $100 to review it, I would definitely do that. All right. Okay. All right. So I'm going to grab a drink. All right, so if there's any questions while we're going through this, make sure you could put the questions on the Q&A or on the chat session. All right, my voice is starting to go already. All right, last piece of the foreclosure process is the share sale. So what happens is that during that foreclosure process, the court is going to grant final judgment to the mortgage lender, and then the court will issue. Now, just understand that these are all practical, and putting a disclaimer that I'm not an attorney, and this is not legal advice, all right? So the court would issue a writ of execution ordering the sheriff to basically auction the property so that they can auction the property to get money from the auction, the sale. Now, in the auction, there's what's called an upset price. And that upset price is usually the lowest amount that the bank is willing to take. And so most of the time, if there's a high mortgage, the property never gets sold. And so it goes to the bank, and then it becomes what's called a real estate owned REO. So basically, bank takes possession of the property. So the upset price is the mortgage balance with interest, penalties, attorney fees, and all that. So it accrues. It's like a snowball effect. And then if it's not sold at the sheriff's sale, then it goes to the bank and then becomes an REO. So here's a consideration. So if you as an agent or an investor are working on a short sale during the foreclosure process, and then you have a sheriff's sale coming up, now then if it goes to sheriff's sale and somebody buys it at the sheriff's sale, or it goes to the bank, you basically have wasted all your time and effort on this, because there's no commission, and you lose as an investor, you lose that deal. And so does that mean that it's too late when there's a sheriff's sale? No, we've worked on short sales where there was a month left in, but there's a lot of things that that we have to filter out, and we have to get answers before we work on it. We don't just blindly say, oh, let's do it, let's go for it. There's a lot of considerations that we have to take into consideration. And then one of the things is, I guess, if you're an investor and it's going to sheriff's sale, now you have a little more information on the property, so that way, even if it goes to sheriff's sale, the investor can pick it up at the sheriff's sale. Meaning the condition of the property, what's on title, and so you kind of have more knowledge than your average person that's going to the sheriff's sale, right? And then we talked about deficiency. The lender has the right to pursue and get judgment for any deficiency if it goes to sheriff's sale. And so what is the whole point of doing the short sale? It is because you want to waive that deficiency. Well, I mean, the short sale and the deed in lieu. And that deficiency I'm not an attorney, I'm not an accountant, so that has an impact on your tax return. There is no longer that waiver that the government has imposed previously, where any deficiency is waived. Not any 1099 that the bank files, and if there's any deficiency, the bank there was this act that basically said, okay, that is waived, so that no longer is, and so you have to take that into consideration. All right.